makes video games special compared to movies or books is that they're the only medium that allows you to go off the beaten path. In fact, you are oftentimes rewarded for it. Games with good secrets remain in our hearts and minds because of that feeling of discovery. From touching tributes to great unlockables, the following secrets just made our year all the sweeter. I'm Cy for WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 coolest video game secrets of 2022. Number 10. Paying Tribute. Gotham Knights. Following up the Arkham series, Gotham Knights was always going to have its work cut out for it, but you can't deny that the developers did their best to show their love of the source material. The game is chock full of references to the DC universe and the huge lineage of the Batman franchise as a whole. The gang's Belfry hideout alone is fit to burst with references to the likes of Ace the Bat-Hound and the histories and relationships between many characters. However, some of the best references are touching tributes to people outside of the stories themselves. In Gotham Hospital, players can come across a plaque for Neil Adams. The name may not mean much to most gamers, but Adams is credited with some of Bat's best adventures during the hero's Bronze Age and even the creation of Ra's al Ghul, who is a leading antagonist in this very adventure. Similarly, in Old Gotham, there's a tribute to George Perez, who also shaped the DC universe. Most prominently, he co-created the new Teen Titans, which included the character of Nightwing, so quite literally, Gotham Knights doesn't exist without him. It's a loving homage to two legends who passed away earlier in 2022. Number 9. An Ode to the Past. Kirby and the Forgotten Land. In terms of Nintendo's catalogue of mascots, Kirby isn't necessarily the most well-known or perhaps even given the love he deserves. As such, it was quite the surprise that Forgotten Land turned out to be the hit that it was. Now with 30 years of adventures under his tiny adorable feet, the pink puffball had made the leap to full 3D for the first time in one of his best outings to date. In World 4, the player visits Northeast Frost Street. Standing prominently in the city is the clock tower, the time of which is permanently locked to 4:27. This may seem like nothing, but at the end of the stage, players can actually take Kirby onto the platform below, wherein they are rewarded with a rather specific 92 coins. But what does all this mean? Well, stringing those numbers together gives us 4/27/92, or more precisely, April the 27th, 1992, the Japanese release date of Kirby's Dream Land, and as such, the birthday of the little pink puffball. The Forgotten Land launched in March 2022, meaning that shortly thereafter, Kirby officially turned 30, and this was a nice callback to where it all began. Number 8. God of War Totems. Horizon Forbidden West. In the original Horizons DLC chapter, The Frozen Wilds, it was possible to locate and collect the stranded items, a figure, a set of shackles, and a necklace that referenced Kojima Productions' upcoming Death Stranding. In response, Death Stranding snuck in a few holograms of Horizon's most striking machines. In Horizon Forbidden West, Guerrilla Games lovingly paid tribute to another Sony property. Being little more than tiny wood carvings, they're quite easy to miss, but there are indeed some totems that represent some of the most beloved characters from God of War's modern relaunch. In order to help locate these, Aloy can use her focus to track them. Firstly, players come across an axe buried in a tree, which leads to a very familiar wooden shack in the snow. Here they come across the Totem of War. Following a small bow and some arrows leads Aloy to a statuette that she remarks as boy, and the final two are a pairing that are found by tracking marks left by a well-constructed hammer. Aloy describes them as two brothers, one looks tough and the other kind of fussy. There is a neat reward attached to collecting all of these, one final reference. The Mark of War face paint covers Aloy's features in a white powder and a familiar red streak across her eye. Number 7. Poetry Master. God of War Ragnarok. Much like Horizon and Death Stranding before it, God of War's recent outing paid homage back to Aloy's adventures and in fact a whole lot more. Books are just one of a few different kinds of artifacts that players can find throughout their Ragnarok journeys, and it's very easy to just scoop them up as you go without second thought. The first one players can organically come across has some familiar symbols on the cover and, if inspected in the menu, holds a poem about a red-haired girl fighting machines. Wait a minute, that sounds familiar. Later collectibles such as We Who Remain talk of a cruel father and his surrogate daughter, and Tool and Bang about allies of steel and fur, referencing The Last of Us and Ratchet and Clank respectively. These books don't lead to anything, but each one is a tiny piece of art in its own right, with a cute cover and a different kind of poem inside of each that references different PlayStation Studio games, from the likes of Uncharted to MLB The Show of all things. There's also a hidden line of dialogue in the game that references PlayStation All-Star Battle Royale, so that's officially a canon thing that happened to the Ghost of Sparta, in case you were wondering. Number 6. Time Cop, Titanfall 2. The beauty of secrets, Easter eggs and trivia is that they're sort of evergreen. Whilst Remedy Entertainment's quality FPS Titanfall 2 didn't release in 2022, not by a long shot, it managed this year to be a gift that kept on giving. In March 2022, Remedy's narrative historian David, aka Frozen Fro, tweeted that there was an undiscovered Easter egg still lurking within Titanfall 2. Fans were thrown into a frenzy, and a day later it was found. During the mission Effect and Cause, there's a corridor filled with fire that the player must use their time-travelling device to get past. However, standing by a certain door and swapping between time periods 88 times, a reference naturally to Back to the Future, opens the door to unveil a rather ridiculous scene. An electrified body lays on the floor with a skeleton doing the splits across 2 countertops. It's too specific to be something random and is in fact a reference to a scene in 1994's Time Cop featuring Jean-Claude Van Damme, who strikes the pose to avoid electrocution when he tasers an enemy. At this point, Titanfall 2 was more than 5 years old, and yet it became gaming news again in 2022 when this unseen secret was finally found. Number 5. The Pet Iguana, CYBERPUNK 2077. Originally releasing in 2020, the state of CYBERPUNK 2077's launch has become video game history already. Instead of focusing on that, it's worth saying that patches to the game in the following years have brought CYBERPUNK to a much more stable, playable and enjoyable place. With the Edge Runners anime reigniting interest this year, players returned to Night City to discover the game in a much healthier state. They also found a bunch of new things included by updates. February 2022's 1.5 update introduced Nibbles the cat, a feline friend who can hang out at V's apartment and be fed and given pets. However, he's not the only animal buddy you can acquire. During the early game mission The Heist, you can explore Yorinobu Arasaka's home, and specifically next to the NPC's Iguana perch is a collectible egg. If this is returned to V's apartments, Johnny Silverhand will scoff, but V will remark that patience is a virtue. Sure enough, after a few in-game months, the egg will hatch into a fully formed and interactable new lizard friend. The Iguana can also hang out with Nibbles in the most adorably chilled out way. So, what animal is next? Seriously, CDPR, let me turn V's apartment into a personal zoo, please. Number 4. The Sea's Legend, Pokémon Legends Arceus. Taking players into the distant past of the world of Pokémon, Legends Arceus proved to be an interesting spin on the long-established formula of Nintendo's well-worn monster collecting series. It also tucked away some of the rarest Pokémon of all time, only to be obtained by the most devoted of fans. Arriving at the Cobalt Coastlands opens up the request The Sea's Legend. Professor Laventon has apparently witnessed a rare Pokémon out in the ocean, and it's down to the player to find the truth. However, the answer is in a totally different game. Pokémon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, which were released 2 months prior to Legends Arceus, are set hundreds of years after. As such, there is a book in Canalave Library which chronicles the Sea's legend after the fact and informs the player they need 3 particular Pokémon in their party. With Mantike, Weasel and Overquill on their persons, the player can swim through a strange monument in the ocean to open up a cave on the other side of the region. Within it, the ultra-rare legendary Pokémon Manaphy and Fione can be found. This is important because these Pokémon have previously only been available as an unlockable for finishing Nintendo DS side game Pokémon Ranger or as limited time events, so it's a worthy reward at the end of a very unique mystery. Number 3. Grafted Blade Greatsword, Elden Ring. Elden Ring's world seems at times to be sewn together by dark corners of intrigue, and as such it has plenty to discover. With optional areas, boss fights and equipment out the wazoo, there are a lot of things that each adventurer can easily miss on their own personal journey through the lands between. Famously, what made Elden Ring such a tasty prospect before it even had its first reveal was the names it was bringing together. Combining the talents of Dark Souls director Hidetaka Miyazaki with famed American author George R.R. Martin meant that fans of brutal fantasy were in for a treat. An ode to Martin's previous work exists as a reward for conquering a particular optional boss fight against Leonine Misbegotten. Stylized on the Iron Throne, the throne in Game of Thrones that everyone spends 8 seasons and an incomplete number of books fighting over, the Grafted Blade Greatsword is literally a sword made of smaller swords. It's as ridiculous in design as it is in damage output. Requiring a strength of 40 to wield, it won't be something that most players can make use of right away, but in the long run becomes a hell of a useful weapon. What could be stronger than a giant greatsword? A giant greatsword made of many other swords, obviously. Number 2. The Secret Chapter, Bayonetta 3. For a long time, Bayonetta 3 felt like it was trapped in development hell. 5 years after its announcement, it finally dropped onto the Nintendo Switch, satiating fans' desire for the kind of dramatic zaniness that only Platinum Games can serve up. The story closes with lots of questions that a potential future of the franchise may have to answer, but the game doesn't end when the credits roll. At this point, when the player resumes control, Rodin will offer to sell the player the old picture book for 4,100 halos. The book itself is actually locked, and the 3 keys are scattered throughout the game. They're well worth seeking out, however, as they unlock an entirely new and completely unique chapter of the story. Playing as Cereza as she explores a magical wood, the whole thing is yet another overt Alice in Wonderland homage within the Bayonetta series. However, more than that, it feels like a loving nod to indie games. With a soft storybook art style and a relaxing pace, it's a far cry from the high-octane action of the rest of the game. What it means for the series moving forward is anyone's guess, but it's a truly intriguing little bumper to the long-awaited Bayonetta 3. Number 1. Secret Doom Level, Dying Light 2. Open world games hide some of the best secrets, and both entries into Techland's Dying Light series have some really brilliant stuff. Most memorably, the first game had a chimney on a roof that led to, of all things, World 1-1 from Super Mario Bros. In the game's 2022 sequel, the developers really outdid themselves. At the heart of the game's best secrets are a selection of collectible black rubber ducks with top hats and maliciously glowing evil eyes. Players must search high and low for these demented bath toys, as some are on the roofs of the tallest buildings and others are literally locked under the sea. However, when all 5 are recovered, a previously locked door at the VNC Tower will open and players can take an elevator down to a secret chamber. Placing the ducks around the room and connecting power cables into the shape of a pentagram unlocks the most unique combat challenge of the game. With stylized pixelated vision, crunchy MIDI heavy metal and an overpowered revolver, the stage is a loving homage to the original Doom games. It's always wonderful to see a modern title pay its dividends to the greats, especially as Dying Light's first-person action wouldn't be the same without Doom. Rip and tear, Aiden. Rip and tear. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Which of these secrets was your favourite from 2022? And of course, let us know of any others that we missed. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.